This is a Faith FM podcast. You're listening to The Faith Experiment with Robbie Berghan, right across Australia, right here on Faith FM.
Right off the bat, I want to tell you up front that I used to be a very staunch atheist. I had nothing to do with religion. In fact, I despised people who were religious, and I made it my goal to convert religious people to my worldview of no religion, atheism. Obviously, if you look at some of the imagery I've invoked in the slides, if you've read in any of the presentation summaries, you'll know that something's changed, because this doesn't seem very atheistic in its structure and the advertising, and that's intentional. I'm going to take you back to this great city of Brisbane in the year 1990, or the 1990 decade. Now, I used to live in Brisbane. I haven't lived here for almost 20 years, but I used to live here in the 1990s. And I think it's one of the greatest cities in our country. What do you think? Absolutely. And so in the 1990s, I was living in Brisbane, and I want to share how my world looked before any of this religious worldviews and things that I started getting into. So I started my career as a civil engineer. In fact, I worked not far from here in a place called Springwood. You heard of Springwood, I'm sure. Used to work down there as a junior civil engineer. And this was the time that the M1 was being built, the new M1, when they expanded it to the multi-lane thing down the Gold Coast. And I was a part of that team that did sections of it. So the almost section, I was involved in designing that. So if you don't like it, come talk to me and I'll put a complaint in. But I was a civil engineer, but that wasn't my passion. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a computer programmer. But in the early 1990s, computer programming was sort of a really distant thing. No one really thought much of it here in Australia. It was kind of perceived as only people working at NASA were programmers. And so my wonderful guidance counselor in school, in preparing me to take electives for university, said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be a programmer." And they turned at me and laughed and said, "That's not a future. And what you should do is take your second choice, which is engineering." So that's why I went and studied engineering. And I would love to meet that guidance counsellor and really rub their nose in it. But anyway, what can I do? So what happened is, over time, I changed careers. By about 96, 97, I became a software engineer in the city at South Bank. And so this was really my calling. My calling was analytical thinking, reasoning, problem solving, and getting paid for it. And so this was when I was really my happiest. And this was in my early 20s. Now, if you are old enough to remember, in the 1990s, pretty much from 1995 to about 2003, around there, we call that or know that as the dot-com. Two people know. So you're all much younger than that, which is fantastic. It was the dot-com bubble, which meant that the internet became a thing. All these internet businesses started growing, and then all of a sudden it all crashed in the early 2000s. But I was working at the peak of it, which was right before a thing called Y2K. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it means that you're a Gen Z, not a millennial. Y2K was a belief that we all had, that the world was going to end technically in year 2000 because of software problems. And so around this time, software programmers were getting paid astronomical amounts of money. I'll put it in context. I was 21 and I was earning more money myself than my mother, who was a nurse, had been working for 30 years, and my father, who was a sales manager. Their two salaries combined in the 1990s, I was earning more of those two things combined as a software developer because of the dot-com bubble and the Y2K. So I was living the dream, and that enabled me to literally live the dream. Every young guy's desire is to go out and party each night, which I did, and I took that partying to the world. I was able to travel around Europe with my best friend. We went backpacking and partying and all the scenes around Europe, and went around Southeast Asia as well. And my parents were like, "I can't believe you have this life. When we were growing up, we couldn't have they used to say two bob. Couldn't scratch two bob together." And so it was a great time. I was just loving it. I had bought these four cars, and I was the envy of most of my classmates. My classmates, a lot of them, no offence to them, but they had chosen to go down different careers, and they were struggling with Centrelink payments for study as well as for working at the local shops and things, while I'm driving around in one of my four cars and travelling around the world and all these sorts of things. And you can imagine I was very arrogant because I had the resources to be so. And as I said, living the dream job as a software developer. And as a 22-year-old, I went and got myself a financial advisor, and the financial advisor sat down and we laid out a plan for me so that I would be able to retire at the age of 35. Now, I can tell you right now, I have passed the date of being 35, but as you'll get to know me in the course of this series, I have also passed on this version of my life. So in this retirement strategy, it was basically buy a house, live in it, then move out, build another one, rent that one out, and repeat and enlarge until you can retire. Everything was going fantastic. I had shares in the company that I was working for, and it was amazing. At the age of 22, my investments in the company, the stock that I had, because I was an employee, was projected to be about $1.2 million at the age of 35. And so as long as I could have some other resources incoming, it was going to be sweet. But as you'll see, what we plan now doesn't necessarily last forever. This was the first house that I built down past Springwood. And I happened to add to that story. I added a fiancé to it because I thought, well, that's the next thing I need to do. And we were about to get engaged by the end of 2001, beginning of 2002. So this is all early 2001. So you're up to speed with how my life was looking in the year 2000 and starting the year 2001. Now, I'm going to share with you 3 things that happened to me in the year 2001 that shaped the course of my life and changed its trajectory. And what I'll be sharing from the second part tonight for the rest of the masterclass series is a result of what happened in these 3 moments. So let me share with you what I call my 3 defining moments of 2001. The first one took place in a nightclub in Brisbane. I won't tell you which one. I believe it's still there. I was there in January. It was quite hot, as you can imagine. It was very humid, and you go into these nightclubs and you're with lots of strangers who are dancing and gyrating around on the dance floor, and the natural result is you get hot. And I'll put this in as a footnote. I used to be in martial arts, and I used to go into these places to have a bit of fist exercising, if you know what I mean. And so I was there looking for some exercise, and it was hot. I was there with my friend, my best friend, his girlfriend, and my fiancé. Anyway, long story short, I was hot, so I thought I'd go to the restroom and get some water, as I would do. I was accustomed to this. Splash it on your face, cool down, and then go back in and hit the floor and look for some action, so to speak. So I went into the restroom, and this isn't the exact one. I can't get a picture of it today, but it looks something like this. I went in there, I bent over, got the water, splashed in my face, and what do you do next, do you think? You stand up. And when you stand up, what are you looking straight into? You guys can read. That's excellent. You're going to pass this class, I guarantee it. So I looked into the mirror, and as I'm standing there looking into the mirror, immediately behind me on this shoulder, I could see the dark, shadowy figure of someone. You know how dimly lit these places are. And when I saw that, ladies might have to help you out. Men, you will understand this. You don't stand behind a man in a restroom, right, men? Oh, come on, give me some affirmation here. Yes. And so I was about to turn around to tell this man in no uncertain terms, get away from me. But when I turned around to see this person and teach him a lesson, there was no one behind me. And I was like, what? So I turned back around, and in the mirror, there is still someone there. Now, people ask me, what did it look like? It looked like a proximity of some dark, shadowy figure in the form of a person. And so I see this, and I'm looking in the mirror. This is the second time. I turn around, nothing's there. So I'd see the third time, and I start yelling and cursing and swearing at this thing in the mirror, and I turn around, and it's still not there. And I turn back the 4th time looking in the mirror, and I get an impression, not voices. I didn't hear voices. I'm not crazy, I don't think. The impression I got was this. It was an impression of oppression. Do you know what oppression is? When you feel, actually there's a song going around, very popular on social media now, Anxiety. Have you heard that song? Shame on you. Get off social media. No, just kidding. But you've heard the song, right? And everyone doing the songs on TikTok and those things, the song will start and someone's dancing. I'm not going to repeat it because I will show you how amazing I am not a dancer. But they're dancing around, and then what comes behind them? You've seen this on TikTok and Instagram and social media. They repeat these songs, this anxiety song. And they're dancing around, and right behind them comes someone pretending to be the anxiety. And it's like this freak out sort of session. That's kind of how I felt. The thought that I had was, you, me, as in me, are mine, the one behind me, and you can run, but you can't hide. This was the impression I got, and it was a horrible feeling, and so I did what any of you black belts out there would have done. I ran out of it, because I can't fight against shadowy figures. I wasn't trained for that class. So I ran out of that nightclub, got my fiancé, got my friends, we got a taxi, and we started coming home. I didn't tell them what had happened, and the whole way I'm going, what the blank, 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 blank was that? But being the rational guy I am, and being the program that I am, and the skeptic that I am, I found an answer to the problem. The answer was somebody had to have spiked my drink. That would explain it. I hallucinated something, and so that's what it was. No big deal. Don't freak out. So for the next couple of weeks, that was the answer to this moment. The problem is, no matter how much I told myself that that's what had happened, something kept telling me that's not what happened. You know that's not what happened. So I kept it to myself.
You're listening to The Faith Experiment with Robbie Berghan. On this episode, Robbie is sharing how his world was turned upside down shortly after the attacks of September 11th, 2001, and how he tried to make sense of the moment. Be sure to follow him on YouTube and subscribe to his website at faithexperiment.com. And now, here is Robbie.
Because I was a very staunch atheist. My whole circle of friends was staunch atheists, still are, by the way, staunch atheists. And our worldview was, and mine was at the time, is that if it's metaphysical, that means it's beyond the physical thing, it is not real. It's a very limiting thought, but that's what we had in our worldview. So that was the first moment that started a series of events. Here's the second one. About 2 or 3 months later, I don't remember exactly, my best friend, I told you before, he had a girlfriend, I had a fiancée. He had had a fight with her. And so he called me and said, look, I've had a fight with my girlfriend. I want to make it up to her. And the best way I know how is to take her out. But because we're in sort of this shaky relationship right now, can you be there with me in a double date with your fiancée to sort of take the focus off me? I said, I'm not interested. He said, come on, I would do it for you. I said, well, here's the thing. I don't want to drink. Because after that mirror night, I decided I wasn't going to drink for a while because I was a big drinker back then. And so anyway, he begged and he pleaded and he said, look, if you just do this for me, I won't ask anything for a couple of months. I said, all right. So we all went out, the four of us, and I was the driver. So we drove into the city, went to a couple of nightclubs. It was about 4 in the morning that they'd had enough. They got in the car. By the way, do you know how boring a nightclub is when you're sober? So we get into the car. I'm driving back. We're driving down the M1. We're heading towards, I don't know if you know where the Logan motorway meets the M1 down there. You know, there's a BP petrol station. This story takes place right at BP petrol station. So I'm driving down there, everyone's passed out. But there's an electrical storm happening. And we get a lot of them here from time to time. And this storm was impressive because you would look, as you're driving down south, the lightning would start over here in the west, and it would literally, you see the crack come up, the crackle, and it would just keep splintering all the way out to the bay. There was no rain, it was just lightning at this point. And I was like, I have never seen lightning that just goes from one horizon right across and down to the other horizon. I've never seen that. So I thought, well, since it's not raining, let me pull over. And so I pulled over. It is still there today. If you drive, I was there just the other day. I drove past it. Right next to that BP petrol station, there is a big grassy field. Still today. So I pulled my car off. I pulled into that field. The car was running. Lights were on. They were all asleep. But I opened my door up. I got out and I'm standing out in front of the bonnet. So the car's behind me. And I'm looking up at this lightning, just going, man, this is impressive. But as I was looking at it, I got startled with a thought in my head, not a word, I'm not crazy. The thought was this. You know, if the world was going to end, it would probably start like this. And I was like, I almost turned around like, who said that? It sounded like my thought, my words in my own thoughts. See, the thing is, I never believed in the end of the world. In fact, I still don't in some respects. But this thought of if the world was going to end, it would probably start with this lightning thing. I thought, where did that come from? But before I could process that thought, the second thought came, which was this. And if there is a God, you're lost. Now, I have to explain something. As an atheist, I did not believe in morality. Do you know what morality is? It's the line between right and wrong. I didn't believe in that. I believed that a bunch of people in a society got together and said, we think this is good and we think this is bad. So therefore, we will make this a moral value. And I would prove this by saying, in some cultures, it's okay to kill. In other cultures, it's not okay to kill. So there can't be one absolute morality. Anyway, this is how I reasoned. By the way, I'm not promoting that. So don't leave here going, that's what I said. So as I'm thinking, where did that come from, right and wrong, me being lost? For me to be lost would mean that I was wrong. But before I could process that second thought, the third thing happened, and that was, back then I described it as a DVD, but probably some of you don't know what a DVD is anymore. You know what a USB stick is? You know what like video is? You put on USB stick? Or for the older people here, there's only a few of you. I'm impressed. You're all so young. But if you imagine a DVD, you know the old discs? You put it into a player and press play? Either way, whatever it was, maybe it's streaming Netflix now, whatever it is. But imagine this. Before I could process this thought of, if the world might end, it might start with this lightning. And if there is a God, then you're lost. Before I could process that, the next thing was like someone pressed play in my head. I'm telling you, I'm not crazy. But when they pressed play, it was like I was paralyzed, looking at the sky. And in my own head, I saw my life play back from beginning to end, to that present moment, not beyond my present at that time. But this is what I saw. I saw myself throughout the years doing things that you would probably say were wrong. My earliest thought back then was, I was about, grade 6 or something, and I walked into my mother's bedroom and into her purse, and I took out money. You know what tuck shop is, right? We still call it tuck shop in Queensland? I've been down in some of the states, they're like, what's tuck shop? I'm like, aren't you a Queenslander? Aren't you civilized? Anyway, so I would steal some money from tuck shop when my mum said not to. But at the time I thought, it's no big deal, it's not hurting anybody. But I saw this flash back years and years later. Then I saw other scenes of me going into the stationery cabinet at the office, opening the cupboard and going and taking a ream of paper for my printer at home because printer paper was expensive in the 90s. And I thought, I deserve it, I work hard. But what would you call that technically? Steal. So I saw all of, and stealing is one example, it's the safest one. I could share others, but I won't because then you won't look at me the same way. But there's plenty of things I've done in my life that I never thought twice about. That on that night, looking at the sky, seeing this playback in my head, I felt guilty. I saw myself as a good person. I paid taxes, I voted, I did all the good things, I even gave the Red Cross, I did things. But my own memory of my own actions made me feel guilty. And I can't move, I'm literally like a paralyzed person. As this is playing out in my head, then all of a sudden, guess what happened? You have no idea, but guess. No lightning. The horn honked in the car. My fiance woke up and she's like, what on earth are you doing standing in the field in the middle of a lightning storm at 5 a.m? So I snapped out of it, got back in the car and drove home, all went to bed. And I thought to myself, what the blankety blank 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 was that? Then I tried to tell myself, you're working too hard. You're tired. I was doing 2 sets of jobs. I was working my regular job and I was doing contract programming from midnight to 3 a.m. and then I'd start my regular job at 9 a.m. and do repeat. Because I was about trying to acquire an empire. A couple of months went by after this night and I woke up, it was a Wednesday morning I think it was, and I came downstairs and I got my ironing board out, I got my shirt out, I was ironing my shirt, having the TV turned on, and when I was ironing my shirt I looked up and what I saw on the television was this. And I'm sure for those who are not Gen Z, you've seen this too, or you may have even saw it. Anybody not seen this before? Okay, some of you haven't. So I saw this for the first time, I think it was Wednesday the 12th or something, ironing my shirt, watching the news, and I saw what you're about to see right now. You'll see a plane come any second here. There it is. And it hits the building. And I saw that, and I said, whoa, look at the special effects we can do now. What movie is this from? See, if you were around in early 2000s and late 1990s, just about every second movie coming out of America was about the end of the world. Arnold Schwarzenegger, you remember him? He had one called End of Days. Then there was Deep Impact, where asteroids were going to come and blow the Earth up as they went to blow the asteroid up. And then there was Alien Invasion, Independence Day. There were all these sorts of movies. And so I saw this, and I thought, wow, this is another one of the movies on the end of the world. This looks amazing. These special effects. You got to remember something. We had just seen Toy Story 1. That was our example of special effects back then. But this was pretty good. So anyway, I finished ironing my shirt, I got dressed, hopped in the car, and I drove to work. And in those days, I listened to my CDs. I never turned the radio on. Who listens to the radio? I work in the radio now, by the way. And anyway, I get to the office. I go up, I was working on the 8th floor at South Brisbane. And I walk in, and my team, we had 20-something people working in my team in IT. They were all sitting around one computer that had a dial-up internet connection. And they were watching 30-second little snippets that CNN would upload, and you could download and watch 30 seconds. There was no streaming back then. And I was like, what are you guys doing? They said, you haven't heard? I said, heard what? They said, America is under attack. I said, what are you talking about? America's under attack. America is under attack. I said, by who? We don't know. I said, I thought that was a movie. No. This is real time. It's happening right now. So we're trying to figure out who could it be? How could the CIA not know? And the NSA and the FBI and all these different agents, how could they not know? Eventually my manager said, guys, you can't solve this problem. It's not your job. Sit down and get back to work. So we did. But as I went to sit down in my cubicle, my co-worker next to me in the other cubicle, his name was Chris. Chris considered himself an evangelical atheist. You ever heard of one of those? That is an atheist whose mission is to evangelize. So we were good friends. Now, as he was sitting down in his cubicle and I was sitting in my cubicle, he leaned over and he said, hey, you know, this was predicted.
You're listening to The Faith Experiment with Robbie Berghan. On this episode, Robbie is sharing how his world was turned upside down shortly after the attacks of September 11th, 2001, and how he tried to make sense of the moment. Be sure to follow him on YouTube and subscribe to his website at faithexperiment.com. And now, here is Robbie.
What are you talking about? This was predicted. I said, you got to be kidding me. We don't believe in prediction. He said, I'll email you. So he sat down, he emailed me from here, and I was over here, and I got the email here. And this is what he emailed me. A prediction written by a guy called Nostradamus. You've heard of Nostradamus, right? So I'm like mind-blown. Because in the last couple of months, I've seen dark, shadowy figures in mirrors. I'm having these moral convictions looking at lightning storms, and now this guy's talking about mystics and future telling. Like, what is happening to my world? So he emails me this email, and this is what it said. It comes from the true prophecies of Nostradamus, so you know it must be what? I'm being a little bit facetious. But this is what it said. It said the sky, let me see if this will work, there we go. The sky will burn at what? 45 degrees latitude, fire approaches the great new city, immediately a huge scattered flames leaps up. Within months, rivers will flow with blood, the undead will roam the earth for what? A little time. So I read this in my cubicle here, and I stand up, I reach over and I go, you're an idiot. And he's like, what? You don't get it? I said, no, I don't get it. He said, let me show you. The sky will burn. What happened today? The sky was on fire. I said, that's a bit of a stretch. But wait, there's more. At 45 degrees latitude, if you look on the map, New York City is about 46 or something degrees latitude. See, sky is burning. Look where it says, the great new, that's New York. I said, you have lost the plot. But he continues on, he says, but watch this. Immediately huge scattered flames leaps up. I said, they didn't go up, they went out. I'm a very technical person. He said, no, they went up. And then he continues on and says, within months, rivers will flow with blood. We are going to war. I said, no, duh. Of course the Americans will go to war. Who with? We don't know, but they're going to war for sure. This is another Pearl Harbor. We remember saying that in 2001. And then it ends with, and the undead will roam the earth for a little time. And he said, the zombies are coming. And then with that, he starts laughing and laughing. He says, I gotcha. I said, you idiot. He said, sit down. So we both sat down. I said, oh, I can't believe I fell for it. I was gullible. He didn't believe any of this. He just thought it was like, see how pathetic these religious people are, these mystic people are. This is ridiculous. He doesn't know it. To this day, he doesn't know what the impact that had. Because in programming and problem solving, you're always looking for patterns. And patterns don't exist until there's at least 3 points. And this was the third weird point. The first weird point was the mirror. Second weird point was the storm. And now the third weird point was, could it even be possible? Now, I didn't believe this stuff for a second. But September 11, it was clear from that moment the world was going to change forever. And whether you were around to see this happen or whether you were born after this, it doesn't matter, because the world we live in today is called the post-9/11 world. In fact, the legislative frameworks that most of our countries have set up today is a result of September 11 having an impact on it. You see, what happened was, in the coming days and weeks, the United States President George W. Bush, he got up and he said, we are going to start a war on terror. Not a person, not a place, not a city, not a region, but just a thing. And the great thing with a war on terror is you will never know when the war has finished. In fact, there's an American white paper that was put out called The 100-Year War on Terror. This was before they declared war on terror. And so it's clear that there's something happening in the world. Now, this was September 12 in Australia. The very next day, we woke up to this. Does anybody remember what this was? Well, I put it on the screen, so you better remember it. The very next day in Australia, Ansett went bankrupt. You say, who was Ansett? Ansett was the precursor before the other airlines like Virgin and Jetstar. Now, here's the problem with this one. You know how before I said that I worked for a company, I had lots of shares in that company, working in IT? Remember that? The company I was working for was the contractor building the Ansett terminal in Sydney. So when Ansett fell on September 13, so did the stock price of the company that I had all my stock in. So overnight, on September 13, well, it was actually by 14th, when I woke up, my projected $1.2 million retirement fund from my stocks, guess what it was equal to? $42,000. By the age of 35. Gone. And I said, how in the world... By the way, September 11 triggered the fall of Ansett because of shareholding parents organisations. So United Airlines was involved and owned parts of Air New Zealand, which owed Ansett. Anyway, the whole thing fell to pieces directly because of September 11. Interestingly, I won't tell you this, well, I'll tell you now, I might as well just said I would. Exactly 1 year after this event, the company I worked for retrenched the 70-something people in my IT department and outsourced us all to India. We all lost our jobs 1 year after this event. My whole world changed because of an event that took place on the other side of the world. In the second presentation, in just a little bit about the CBDCs, I'm going to show you how the concept of globalization has changed our world forever in the financial space. But September 11 didn't just impact Australia with Ansett. There was also this great fear afterwards of this thing called anthrax. People were getting letters in the mail in the United States with this white powder, and if you breathed it, you died. Then in Australia, they announced that they were worried that terrorists might knock down the building in Melbourne. It was really an uncertain period for the first couple of months. And then shortly after, there was the announcing of the invasion into Afghanistan, into Iraq. And by the way, that invasion that started in Afghanistan, well, it was Iraq and Afghanistan, Afghanistan only ended last year, technically. The Americans withdrew and got out of the country middle of last year. It was the longest war that the Americans have ever been in. Longer than Vietnam. And for those of you who remember Vietnam, that was a long war. But this, out past that, and technically it's still a war on terror, it hasn't been closed, but the United States has withdrawn from Afghanistan. So, in the environment that I was in now, my life was going great up till 2001 December. Sorry, 2000, month December. In 2001 in January, all this weird stuff started happening to me. Then the world changed. We couldn't take water bottles on planes anymore because of what happened in America. All these rules started changing and life started changing. And so I used to watch the evening news because you wanted to know what was going to happen next. And the weirdest thing was, the first segment was the Americans, politicians on their platforms talking to the people and the troops, and they're at war in two countries at that point. And they would end every presentation, whether it was the president, whether it was the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Defense, they would end their little speech with the same phrase. Do you want to take a guess what the phrase was? God bless America and God bless our troops. Every single presentation that they gave at the end of that. So I'd watch that here in Australia. I'm very much an atheist, and I'd go, you idiots. But then the next news segment was always something about Osama bin Laden. And they would show footage of him. It was the same footage every night. But it'd be him kneeled down in the desert holding an AK-47. And then you would hear the overlaying of Allah Akbar, which is Arabic for God is great, death to the infidels. So as an atheist sitting here in Australia on the other side of the world, I'd go, you know what? This is a religious war. A war between the Americans and their evangelical Christianity, and a war between these extremist Muslims. This is a religious war. And I don't believe in any of this religion. So why do I have to lose my retirement fund? So I got to thinking, you know what? American foreign politics is based on their view of the Bible. What if these American crazies who are Christian, what if they're reading this book, the Bible, and because of their deluded understanding of it, they're actually self-fulfilling what they think is the prophecy? So it's not real that it's prophecy, it's just that they think it's prophecy, and then because they believe it's prophecy, they make it become fulfilled. Does that make sense? Yeah, I thought it did. And then I thought, what about these other people, these Muslims? What do they believe? I didn't have a clue what a Muslim believed. In fact, I didn't even know the word is Islam. I didn't know what that word was until this whole thing blew up. So I did what any good programmer would do who was curious about knowing how to acquire wealth and avoid all the dangers of the global economy. I studied the religions. That's what you would do too, right? So I got myself a Bible, which is the Christian one there in the Jewish Old Testament. Got myself the Quran, which is the one on the left there. And I thought, while I'm at it, what do the other nutters believe about around the world? So I got some Hindu, the Vedas is the text from the Hindus. I got the Buddhist, they call it the Buddhist Bible in English translation. I got that one. And I actually studied about 6 other Aztec religions and African religions, all these different religions.
You're listening to The Faith Experiment with Robbie Berghan. On this episode, Robbie is sharing how his world was turned upside down shortly after the attacks of September 11th, 2001, and how he tried to make sense of the moment. Be sure to follow him on YouTube and subscribe to his website at faithexperiment.com. And now, here is Robbie.
And so the way I studied it was I bought their books, I read their books the way I would read code in a computer. Dissecting every little piece, trying to figure out what this meant, what that meant, and all that stuff. And then I went and talked to representatives of these worldviews. So online I found some imams who are the teachers of the Quran, and I posed all these questions, and they gave me all their answers to these questions. I did the same with the Hindus and the Buddhists, and with the Catholics representing the Christian world. And what was fascinating is that when you start reading each of these religious texts, I came across a profound statement in what's known as the Dead Sea Scroll collection, which today you would call the Old Testament of the Bible. Not the New, the Old. And amongst these collection of Old Testament scrolls, there was a bizarre statement, and I want to show it to you on the screen here. This comes from a scroll written by a man called Isaiah. And it's interesting, of the Dead Sea Scrolls, this is the most complete scroll that exists in the collection, discovered in 1947 in Qumran, near the Dead Sea in Israel. And this scroll today, you can go to Israel, to Jerusalem, to the museum, and you can see the scroll there today. The scroll is more than, it's 200 BC is the date of the scroll. And so that's 2,200 years, in case you're wondering. So you can see this scroll. The thing's 7 meters long. It's incredible. Now, I want to show you, when I read this, this is what it says in this one part. Now, I'm not expecting you to believe anything tonight. I'm just showing you some of the facts, so to speak. In this book, Isaiah, in this particular section, Isaiah is claiming that his God, Yahweh, is speaking. So this is supposed to be God speaking, okay? This is what God is saying. God's supposed to have said, remember the former things of old. If I was standing here in the present, which side would be the past? This side, right? So which side's this side? Future. You got your tense right. Congratulations. Now, if I was to remember, what side would that be on? On the past. And the former things, where would that be? Former means later or older things. And old things is this side, right? So what's the focus that this verse is trying to get us as a reader to think about? The past. Okay. So remember the things of old. For I am who? God. He's claiming that he's God. You don't have to believe this, but this is what he's claiming. He says, I'm God, and there is what? No other. There is no other. Now I thought, that is bold. I've got all these books on my table, by the way, about the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Islam, the Christian, and so on, and the Jewish. And here is one of these books coming out and saying, there is no other God but me. I thought, whoa, there's some big kahunas. That's a bold statement. Now notice what it says. I am God, and there is none other, there is none like me. Twice. Oh, he's trying to get the point across. But if you're like me, which we will be the same by the end of this program, I guarantee it, inquisitive mind, you know what I asked when I read this? I said, if you're going to say that you're God and there's no other God, that you're the only God, there's no one like you, my logical question as the great skeptic that I am, by the way, I'm still a skeptic to this day. But here's the question I would ask as a skeptic. Prove it. Yes or no? If I came to you and said, hey, I know how to earn enough money to buy a Ferrari. You can have a Ferrari in 6 months. What would you say to me? You said ridiculous. All right, fair enough. If you were interested even slightly, you might go, well, this guy is a showman. I don't believe you have a Ferrari. A lot of these influencers on Instagram and TikTok don't have what they say they have. It's been proven. But the logical question is, well, prove it. So I want you to notice, I'm in this worldview. You tell me something, I want you to prove it. If you can't prove it, why would I believe what you're saying? But here's the next part. So the point is here, remember the old things. Why? Because I'm God and there's no one like me. I'm God, there's no one like me. And then he says, declaring the end from the what? So if I'm standing here again in the present, which would be the end? Down here. And what would be the... Sorry, I said it the wrong way, didn't I? The beginning's down here and the end would be down here. You got it, right? So he's saying, I will declare the end, that's down here, which we would call the future. I will declare the future from when? From the past. So he's making the claim, listen, I'm going to tell you something, you're not going to believe it. Literally, you are not going to believe this. I'm God. And there's no other God like me. I'm it. Prove it. I'm glad you asked. Here's how I'll prove it. I'm going to tell you from the past about the future. Now, when I read this, I said, you idiot. The author of this book, Isaiah. You're an idiot. Because you have just created a test of whether or not this book is legit, accurate, true. Because in my great realm of reasoning, I know that this book, the Bible, is a load of rubbish. Right? It's fables. So because I know that that book is a load of rubbish, the fact that the book makes a claim, I will prove that I'm God, I'm the author, and I'm speaking this how? I'm going to tell you the future from the past. I said, you're an idiot, because now I can prove that you're not real. Make sense? I have another series of masterclasses I teach. It's called the Faith Experiment. My whole life, in the last 20-something years, I call the faith experiment, because what I'm doing is I'm experimenting with the supposed faith of this book. I'm putting it to the test to see if it's actually able to do what it says it can do. I've had a remarkable journey, as you'll hear over the next couple of nights. So here's the claim. The claim is that this book is written by God, not just a God, but the only God, and it's got the ability to prove that claim by giving us these predictions or prophecies from the past about the future. Does that make sense? Now, in the next presentation, if you saw the ads that I've been putting on social media for the second presentation on CBDCs, I am going to show you in the next presentation how that there are claims in the past about not just our present we're living in right now, but the very near future. It's incredible. That's the next section we'll look at after the break. So here's the point. The claim is, this claim that this book makes is that there is no other God, only him. And the claim is provable because of the evidence that you can explore and test it yourself. If you didn't think the claim was accurate, saying you're God, you wouldn't give a test for evidence that can't be tested, right? Does that make sense? So here's what I found. I had the Hindu text there, the Buddhist text there, the Muslim text there, and so on. And what I found is that if you read the whole Quran, is there a claim that the book is written by a deity? Absolutely. His name is Allah. If you go to the Hindu text, is there a claim the book is... It doesn't claim the book is written by a deity, but it claims that there is a deity. In fact, a lot of them. 3 main ones. But if you go to the Hindu states today, there's around 33 million deities in the Hindu faith. So does it claim that there is some sort of divine... Yes, it does. But the author of the Vedas, there is no claim in the Vedas text that it's authored by God the same way that the Bible makes the claim. The Islamic text, the Quran, makes the claim that there is one God, Allah, but the messenger is Muhammad, and Muhammad wrote the Quran. And then in Buddhism, there is no claim of it being a divine author or even a divine being. And it's fascinating because in one part of the Buddhist text, there's actually, I usually have the statement, I don't have it tonight because there's a lot of slides, but it makes this statement, it's the story. One of the disciples of Buddha comes to Buddha and says, Buddha, are you an angel? He said, no. Are you a divine being? Buddha says, no. He says, are you a magician? He said, no. And so the disciple, getting frustrated, says, well, what are you, Buddha? And Buddha's response was, I'm awake. That was his answer. He never claimed to be God or an angel or some great magician. He just claimed to be awake. And you ask, what does that mean? I'll tell you. He claims that he understands that there are some certain realities. The world we live in is messed up. This is my translation of the Buddhist principles. The world is messed up. The world the reason it's messed up is because we're all selfish. And there is hope. You can change that situation, but only by following the Eightfold Path to Enlightenment. And the Eightfold Path to Enlightenment starts with you thinking differently, acting differently, and doing differently. It's all about the rights, right thought, right action, right speech, and right so on. So there's no divine for authority in this book. When you come to the Bible, I've just shown you one example of that. There's many other examples. And when you go to some of the other religions, like some of the African tribal religions, or go to the Aztec religion in South America, or even some of the Asian religions outside of Buddhism, you will find some of them have sort of claims that there is some sort of divine being up there. Like, for example, in Chinese, he's called Shangdi. It's fascinating. I spent 4 years studying Chinese and Chinese religion in Taiwan and Beijing, and it's phenomenal what these ancient Chinese believed. In other parts, even in ancient Mesopotamia, there is belief that there was some sort of divine figure that gave a global flood in the Gilgamesh epic. So there are other claims, but here's my point with this slide. Only one of them actually gives you something to test. So is there evidence for it? The Islamic text assumes you believe because it says it so. Same with the Hindu text. Same with the Buddhist text, even though it's not a claim for religion or divinity. But when you come to the Bible account, it claims that it's got evidence to support that claim.
You're listening to The Faith Experiment with Robbie Berghan. On this episode, Robbie is sharing how his world was turned upside down shortly after the attacks of September 11th, 2001, and how he tried to make sense of the moment. Be sure to follow him on YouTube and subscribe to his website at faithexperiment.com. And now, here is Robbie.
So I've spent the last 24 years studying this one book and its claims. And there's 1,817 predictions in the Bible. So if you come back here in the oldest part, which would start with the stories of Genesis, and you go all the way down here to the end of the Bible, and it ends with the story of Revelation, in that entire span of 66 books, there are 1,817 predictions. Some of those predictions, like the longest ones, are probably about 30 or 40 verses. There's another one that is over 240 verses, but it's one prediction. So 240 verses have to be completely fulfilled for one prediction to count. And so when the Bible says, I'm going to give you the past predictions to tell you about the future, and when it happens the way it says it happens, you'll know that my claim is right, what the Bible's essentially saying is, listen, you want to rubbish the credibility of the book? No problem. But you can't do it until you've studied 1,817 predictions. So I thought, challenge accepted. Because it can't be that hard to prove the thing wrong. There are two things in a biblical count that you need to have reliability. It would have to be historically accurate, and it would have to be proven track record. You can't fluke it. There's studies that have been done that have shown that the average person, out of every 10 predictions they make, the average person, you'll get 3 right. 3 out of 100. So it's 3%. If prediction is your business, meaning you're like a psychic or a tarot card reader or you read the tea leaves or something, it goes up to 16% accuracy, which is pretty good compared to 3%, isn't it? The problem is that's only 16 people out of 100 people with their palms being read that would actually turn out to be right, which means that you're not actually predicting it correctly, you're fluking it. So you'd want to see something that got it 100% right to prove that it was God. I mean, if God's God, he knows the beginning from the end, you'd expect it to be how many percent right? 100% right, or he's not 100% God. So this was a journey I started on. And so what I want to do in about 30 seconds, we're going to have a break just now. I want to show you one example of one of the 1,817 prophecies. I want to show you how improbable this thing has turned out to be. This is one prophecy. I'm just going to read this and I'll show you a picture. The picture will be worth 1,000 words. So this is in an Old Testament or a Dead Sea Scroll book called Daniel. We know it's 2,100 years old in terms of the copy. We know the original story that was written in the 6th century BC, so 2,600 years ago. This is one prophecy. This is what it says. Daniel is claiming he's standing and he's having a vision or like a prediction about what's happening in the future. And he says this, I lifted my eyes and I saw standing beside a river. So there's a river. You'll see a picture of this in just a second. In the river there was a what? A ram. The ram was pushing west, north, south, so that no animal could withstand him, nor that any could deliver him from his hand. So there's a ram and it's doing great things. By the way, in Bible prophecy, especially Old Testament prophecy, animals represent kingdoms or powers. So there's some sort of power that's pushing. From which direction? From the west, the north, the south. Then it continues on and says, and I was considering, suddenly there came a male goat. And he was coming from the west, across the surface of the whole earth, without what? Touching the ground. The goat had a notable horn between his eyes. So notice this, there's a goat, it's got a big horn. But the goat doesn't have its feet on the ground. It continues. It says, the goat was moved with rage against the ram, that's him, attacked the ram and broke his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to withstand him, but cast him down to the ground, trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver from the hand. Does it make sense so far? So here's what it looks like. This is an artist's interpretation of what that would look like. Here's Daniel standing by the river Ulai, which is in Babylon. If you know where Babylon is, it's modern-day Iraq today. And in the story, Daniel claims that his God, the same God that says, I tell the future from the past, and it's perfect and blah, 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 that same God, he claims to be giving Daniel a dream. This is what Daniel's telling us as the reader. And he says, look, there was this ram, he was going this way, and there's this goat, the goat was going this way, and the goat has one big horn. And the goat hits that ram and wipes the ram out. And we already, you'll see this even clearer, but we already know in biblical commentary that animals represent powers. The same way it does today. If we see a kangaroo on a world stage, what does that represent? You see a kiwi bird, what does that represent? You get the idea. We still do it today. So what does this dream, this vision about the future that Daniel's given, which was given in the 6th century BC, what's it supposed to mean? Well, it tells us. It says, the ram which you saw having two horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. Now, Media and Persia was the power that came after a kingdom called Babylon. You've all heard of Babylon at some point, I'm guessing. After Babylon came Media Persia. Media Persia is in power, and Daniel receives this dream while Media Persia is the world power. The superpower, so to speak. And in the dream, he's told that there's going to be this thing that's going to come, and it's going to wipe you off the face of the earth. It's going to be this goat, it's going to move fast, and it's going to have this big horn. Now, it goes on and tells us who this this goat is going to be. And it tells us by name. Now remember, this is 6th century BC. I could do a whole presentation. I have presentations on this to prove from archaeology that we know for sure that this was written 6th century BC. Let me show you what it says next about the goat. So we know that's Media Persia. So who is this kingdom going to attack Media Persia? It says, and the male goat is the kingdom of what? Now, when it says this is about 230 years before Greece exists. That's like saying Australia is a big power in the South Pacific and it's going to be conquered by the island of Tharata. You're like, what on earth is that? Don't worry, you'll know in 230 years. And then all of a sudden, 230 years later comes hope I can say it again, Tharata. A kingdom comes, Tharata, somewhere in the Pacific, and it comes and invades Australia and conquers it. But that's improbable. But watch this. The goat represents what? Greece, but the large horn that is between his eyes is the what? First king. Do you know who the first king of the United Greek Empire was? Alexander the Great. First horn. That's the claim of this prediction. 230 years before Alexander is born, this was written. And it's provable. I can tell you a story when Alexander the Great went to conquer Media Persia, and he shows up in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem's in the way from Greece to get to Media Persia, which is basically Iran and Babylon today. So he goes there and he goes to destroy Jerusalem, but when he goes there, out comes some Jews. Some priests, some rabbis, they come out and they say, Alexander, can we show you something? He says, what? They open up this that I just read to you, and they said, our holy book from our holy God, the only God, true God, the one God, it says that you are the first king of Greece, and you are going to go and wipe out Media Persia, which was the superpower of the day. Alexander the Great was so impressed by their holy book that he said, okay, I'm not going to destroy you guys today. And not only that, he says, your holy book, I want it translated into the Greek language. And so 70 rabbis were commissioned to translate the Bible from the Old Testament Hebrew into the Greek Old Testament. And that testament is called the Septuagint. The Septuagint, if you go and study religion today in Greek, like the Old Testament in Greek, you are reading the very translation that Alexander the Great commissioned. Phenomenal. So Alexander the Great saw himself as this fulfillment of this prophecy. So we have Greece going against Medo-Persia. If you know your history, you know who won, right? But then it says this, the large horn between his eyes is the first king. We saw that already, Alexander the Great. Let's keep moving. It says, therefore, when the male goat grew very great, but when he becomes strong, the large horn was what? Now, if the large horn is the first king was Alexander the Great, it means that once the large horn, the great king of Alexander the Great, gets the biggest and boastest and fantasticus, that's a really technical word, guess what happens? He breaks. Do you know the story of history? Alexander the Great conquers the then known world at the time, I think the age 33, and he dies. Some say he died because he drunk himself to death. Others have different other theories, but whatever. The point is he died. And then it says, but in its place, in the place of Alexander the Great, 4 ones came toward the 4 winds of heaven. And for the broken horn, the 4 stood up in its place. 4 kingdoms shall rise out of that nation, but not with its power. So Greece would end up being dividing into 4 powers. Do you know your history of the Greek Empire? Alexander the Great created this great big empire. He was fast. He went across the face of the whole earth, so to speak. And as a result of him dying, not having an heir, the 4 generals, how many? How many horns would take over Greece? 4. 4 generals, they took the 4 corners of Greece. And for the next couple of 100 years, they did nothing but fight, trying to dominate once again. But then it says this, they came up for the 4 winds, it says, but out of one of them, so out of one of those 4 general territories, and that lasted a lot longer than 1 general, so there was many successions, came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, toward the glorious land, which is a reference to Israel today. And it says, and it cast down some of the hosts of the stars of heaven and trampled them to the ground. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the hosts. In the book of Daniel, the prince of the host is the Messiah, messianic figure. And it says, and by him the daily sacrifices of the temple were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. That's the story. Are you with me so far? Let me show you something. Same thing here. The little horn, so watch the picture. Greece is going to conquer Medo-Persia, then Greece is going to fall under Alexander the Great's death into 4 regions, but those 4 regions will fight it out, but then a little horn's going to come up and it's going to do these things. It's going to go south, it's going to go east, it's going to go into the glorious land, or what we call today Israel. It would be greater than Greece. Greece was the greatest empire in terms of size and power of its day, but it'd be greater than Greece. It would stand against the Messiah. It would cast down the sanctuary. It would take away the temple services, and it would trample on God's people. That's what this little horn's going to do. So get the probability here. Medo-Persia falls to Greece. Greece's king dies. 4 come up in his place, and at some point, out of those 4, 1 comes up and does these 8 things. That's a lot of things, isn't it? This is one of the 1,817 prophecies. Do you know who came after Greece in terms of the big empire? Rome. Imperial Rome. Look at this. Imperial Rome did just that. It went south into Egypt. That's how we have the story of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. It goes down into this part. This is the Roman Empire region. And then it says it would go east into Mesopotamia. It definitely did that. It went all the way into Iran today. Then it goes into the glorious land. It sure did that. In fact, it went in, I think it was 63 BC. It takes over the Galilean region and makes it a precinct of the Roman Empire. And it would be exceedingly greater than Greece. Here is the size of Greece. This is the size of Rome. But Rome lasted longer and Rome had stronger military. Then it says it would stand against the Messiah. Does anybody know which kingdom put the person of Jesus on the cross? Yeah, you saw Mel Gibson's film. We just had Easter recently. You know that it was the Romans that physically nailed him on the Roman source of execution. And then it says it would be casting down the sanctuary. In 70 AD, the Romans came over and said, we've had enough of these Jewish people. They're annoying us to no end. So let's basically get rid of them and expel them. In the process, they destroyed the temple in 70 AD. Then the next thing it says they'll take away the daily temple sacrifices. And this here is the Arch of Titus in Rome today. I was just there about 7 weeks ago. And this is a carving showing, this is the 7 candlesticks, or the menorah, out of the sanctuary, or the temple, being taken by Titus, the Roman general, who burnt down Jerusalem. And then it says that this power, Rome, would trample on God's people. Do you know what happened immediately from this point of this whole Jesus story that you've heard about at Christmas and Easter and those things? The Romans, as in the Roman Empire, started trampling on these people who were calling themselves followers of this Jesus figure. In fact, I was I've been to the Colosseum a number of times, but I was just there the other day as well. And this is a picture of what the Colosseum looks like today. But this Colosseum, during this time of Nero and these emperors that were opposed to these teachings of Jesus, they would take the followers of Jesus, bind them to these poles right around the Colosseum, dip them in tar, and light them while they're alive to provide the lighting for the night games. Did they trample on God's people? You better believe it. This, as I said, is one of the 1,817 predictions in the Bible. One of them. So to put this in perspective, this is what has to happen. 13 predictive elements have to be fulfilled for this one prophecy to be considered fulfilled. Here's the 13 elements. There has to be a kingdom called Medo-Persia by name. That has to fall to a kingdom called Greece by name, by the first king of that kingdom, Greece. Then when he falls, there has to be 4 kings come up. Not 5, not 3, not 2, 4. And out of those 4, one has to come up that does these 8 things exactly. And if one of those things doesn't happen, guess what? It's a false prediction. Would you like to know how many of those things happened? This is one of 1,817 predictions. The statistical probability of that being fulfilled is the equivalency of you winning the gold lotto every single week for your entire life. That's the probability we're talking about. This is one. So this is, when I studied this, as a non-believer, there's 2 logical conclusions I arrived at. One, it's either a complete hoax. Somehow, some way, they faked the prediction so it looks like it fulfilled. The problem is that the last prediction there was as recent as 70 AD. We got copies of the book from 2,200 years ago. And we know that the book is definitely a 6th century document. So I have leaned into this idea that perhaps this book isn't just a hoax. Perhaps it is supernatural. And if it's supernatural, it needs more of my time. So I studied the next of the 817 prophecies. And we're going to do a few of those over the course of this masterclass series on Bible prophecy. Because I want you to see that no matter what you're being told about this book is seriously interesting.
Hey, it's Robbie here. You've been listening to one of my episodes from a live masterclass series that I recently did in 2025 called The Endgame. Now, as a part of this episode, I'd like to give you the chance to claim a free gift. It's a magazine called Daniel and Revelation, The Amazing Prophecies. You really want to get this resource. It's going to help you delve deep into some of the material that I covered in this episode. To get today's free copy, text the code word Daniel to 0488 453 11. That's the code word Daniel, nothing else, just the word Daniel, to 0488 453 11. Our SMS bot will ask you for some details and we'll get this great resource out to you absolutely free.
You have been listening to The Faith Experiment with Robbie Berghan, right across Australia, right here on Faith FM. Connect with us via text message on 04888 453 11. That's 04888 453 11. Or send an email to robbie@faithfm.com.au and let us know what you thought of this episode.